Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Compelling Conversations podcast. Today, I'm joined by an awesome young man, Zain. Zain, thanks so much for being here, dude.
Yeah. No, thank you for having me. I'm excited for this. It's my first time being on a podcast, so feel pretty cool right now.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. It's been a minute in the oven, but it's finally cooked up now, huh?
Yeah, exactly. No, it has been, man. Unfortunately, I had just a lot of stuff in general on my plate, and so yeah, I was really excited to do this. So I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And where are you joining us from?
Today I'm out of Houston, so out of Sugarland, or I should say Richmond, Texas. So
Ah,
about an hour out from where you're at, and so yeah, we're just from the humble abode in the room.
cool, cool. All right. So,
Mhm.
I wanted to begin by asking, do you ever feel left behind?
Oh wow, okay, getting straight into it. Do I ever feel left behind? Hmm. Just like in this, just in a general sense, huh? I would
Mhm.
say at times, yes. So I guess wow, it's such a general thing. In some senses, like so the first thing that comes to my head is like I've always been like a super late on the technology side of things. Like growing up, my parents were kind of they're not wouldn't even say strict, but they were didn't want me or my brothers on like our cell phone and like on Instagram, social media at a really early age. And so I was always that like when you say behind, that's just the first thing that comes to my head is like my friends now like make fun of me for it. Like I'm always behind on like the Snapchats or the Instagrams, or we were even talking about it at your house. Like I literally just recently made an Instagram and like and so in that sense, like and because that's such a big part of today's, like how people keep up with each other, like at times I do feel left behind in that regard. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind is technologically I do feel left behind occasionally. But in general, outside of that, yeah, I feel like at times I do like for example with some of my friends who have moved, like a lot of them, I myself am like a pre-medical student, and so I'm applying to med school right now, and a lot of them like a lot of my close friends from high school who I still keep up with now are like are in business or engineering or whatever field, and they kind of, obviously like as life goes, like people get older and they grow up and move to different areas, and we're still obviously we keep in touch, but um it's specifically being a pre-med student, you're kind of like, especially me being in a gap year, like a lot of being a pre-med student is like waiting, like I'm waiting to see if I'm accepted, or I'm waiting for the application cycle to open, or waiting for this, waiting for that, and then you see people around you who are, they're like buying their first apartment or like buying a new car, and I'm like, oh dang, like, and so even in that regard too, like it's funny, like I've thought about that recently. Like I don't get super down about it, but occasionally I'll be like, dang, like you do kind of feel left behind because it's like you see everyone moving forward, taking the natural steps that people do in their life. And just so I would say specifically with this sort of line of work that I want to go in, it does require a lot of sort of patience. Like even once you're in medical school, like you're still a student technically. Like you're not really out there like officially living and like working and things. And so I do feel that for sure from time to time.
Does it ever make you feel like an outcast?
Mm, I wouldn't say, I don't think an outcast per se. Well, maybe a little bit, because like kind of like I mentioned with the friend thing, like a lot of times I'm talking to them and like they'll be talking about kind of either whether it's their line of work or even just like, oh, like, I had to pay for rent, this, that, or like, oh yeah, like it's so cool, like being on my own or whatever, just like, about like being in that sort of adult world now. And at times I'm like, dang, like I'm still sitting here, like honestly, I'm still in my parents' house, like still in my same room, like. And I'm just like, dang, like, and so yeah, at times a little bit like, luckily, like I feel like it's nothing serious. Like obviously, no one has the intention. Most people don't have the intention of making someone feel that way, but to an extent, like naturally, I feel like that just happens where it's like you see people at a certain stage of your life that you want to be at soon enough, and you're kind of just like, dang, I'm still stuck here. And so, to a certain degree, yeah, a little, maybe a little bit like an outcast, but I wouldn't say it weighs on me too much. But yeah, for sure, a little bit though.
Hmm. That's interesting. You
Mm.
mentioned how, you just created social media and stuff. Um, what is your experience like, not being on that and then coming into this world? What are the differences you've experienced?
Dude, it's so that honestly, that whole world is just wild to me. Like, it's honestly, and I hate to sound like a what do they call it, like a boomer or whatever. Yeah, like oh, I don't know what these kids do and this and that.
Yeah.
Like I respect it honestly. Like the fact that I mean, obviously everything has a negative side to it, and of course so does social media. But like the fact that kids are using it, and not only kids, like adults, grown people are using it to either earn money or like post just like positive things. Whether it's about like I watch stuff on the gym, like gym stuff all the time. Like there's obviously a lot of Islamic content on there. Like so it is a good thing for sure, but it is like it has this sort of like there's this gravity about social media that like it just sucks you in, man. Like whether you can like I like I told you like I'm not a that big of a social media guy and I've never been that, but it's like once you get on there, like there's something about it where it's like I haven't posted anything on Instagram, for example, but like I still check like how many followers do I have, or like I'll see like people on there who like someone who I know closely, and they'll have like something thousand followers, or like, and I'm just like, dang, dude, like, bro, I'm like, bro, what is this guy doing? Like, and I'm just like, why am I not on this level, or like, do I not know enough people, or
Oh,
whatever the case is? And so I'm
that's
just
really
like,
funny you
dang,
mentioned that.
yeah, man. Like, there's that guy at your place at we met one of your friends who I know he does music. I'm forgetting his name.
Abdul
Um,
Rahman.
Abdul Rahman, yeah. And I saw it and I was like, dang, man, like this guy has like 1,500 followers. I was like,
Yeah,
bro, I need to
yeah,
get on his level.
yeah.
But
It was really funny you mentioned that. I really like how you said, that gravity about social media, because I feel that.
right,
Like once you're on,
exactly,
it's
man.
like you're in the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
So for you,
exactly.
like do you have like a control on that, do you think? Or are you still figuring it out, or what is your
I
relationship like?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, man. Like I've tried to like my thing is the key thing that I personally think it's the best for is really my main goal is just to like keep connections with people that I've met over the course of really of my life, but especially at U of H, there's a lot of people that I remember meeting them and literally like we would talk whatever, and then they would be like, "Oh man, like, do you have Instagram?" And I'm like, "Ah, no." And then they were just like, and then they're just like, "Well, I'll see you around." And then like it's just like, "Oh, that's the end of that." Yeah. So I'm like, "Dang,
Yeah, yeah. I love the way you're
dude,
saying all
yeah,
these things. It's like they're so like casual, but it's like spot on. Like that's just how it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
exactly, yeah." Like that's just the nature of the world. Like in general, like I feel like even just outside of like even school, like just if you're a young adult like working or something, like that's just how people like connect now. Like now it's not like you're not like asking someone for their email or even phone number at times. Like a lot of people like I've been talking to for a minute and like we don't even have like I don't know their phone number, and like it's just Instagram or like whatever, Snapchat. um and like that, which is wild to me because like I'm not even that old and I feel old. I'm like, dang, like a phone number is like not even important now. But yeah, like that's basically what it is. And so that's my main goal from it, is to use it to connect with people. And so what I try to do is just like I always keep it in mind whenever I start to go down like how you said, that rabbit hole of like either I'm just scrolling looking through just random, not even people that I know, just like random garbage or whatever. Like
Yeah.
I just tell myself like at the end of the day I'm using this to keep up my relationships with like people that I've met in the past. And so just like keep it at that. Don't get caught up in the like which and I'm not even to bash people who are like maybe you're like you follow a celebrity or you follow a an account like an Islamic account or something like of course there's nothing wrong with that. But it's just for me, like I know if I start to go on there and then like follow those accounts and I'm consistently scrolling, like it'll just become ingrained where like I'll go
Yeah.
so deep into that, like next thing I know I've spent like 2 hours, 3 hours on there. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my main sort of use of that.
I like that. That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that you're free?
Free right now. I have some free time. No, let's see. In general, hmm.
Like, do you feel
Wow, that's a
free?
really good. Do I feel free? Yeah. Uh yeah yeah and yes and no, which is like a I hate when people do that. They're like, yeah, it depends, or yes and no.
Yeah, I mean
But
that's how most things are, right? I'm not
yeah,
looking for like a yes or no answer necessarily, but
right.
I'm curious because I had a question that came up in my mind was, does freedom scare me?
Mhm.
And I just kind of pondered that, and I haven't exactly come up with an answer for that yet. But I'm
Wow.
curious if you do feel free, does that freedom scare you?
Wow, that's pretty interesting. If you don't mind me asking, how'd you come to that? Like, did that just come to you randomly, or was there some like trigger of events that like led you to ask like
It honestly just came to me randomly. Yeah.
randomly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. That I think about that sometimes because like honestly, I live and I'm sure like to an extent you understand like obviously like I'm still living with my parents and like still to be quite honest they financially like in regards to just like daily stuff like food and things like that like they provide for me um gas like my gas if I do have to drive anywhere a whole lot they pay for that and then like so like I'm in this sort of bubble of like still kind of in that sort of like basically I'm not yeah I'm free like obviously my parents aren't going to be like oh like you have to do luckily I'm blessed that they aren't like tiger parents or anything like that but at the same time I it's funny that you mentioned that like being scared of that like having that freedom like I have thought about that because obviously there's going to come a point where probably in the near future where I'll be moved out and like living on my own and at that point there will be well, like I'll have complete freedom that I won't have to ask them anything or really answer to them about like when I'm coming home or anything and so like yeah, it's funny you mentioned like that does sometimes make me a bit nervous. Like I think about that and I'm like, dang, like there's something about like you don't realize that security you have while you're in it until like it's gone. And then you're just like, oh, like I'm on my own now. Like there's no one telling me what to do. There's no one like guiding sort of like, oh, you should be doing this, you should be home at this time. And while at the time, like you think of it as like, oh, this is so annoying and like, my parents are constantly nagging me. But once you're out of it, like it's just like, oh shoot, like, well, what do I do now? Like you have so much
Yeah.
free time to like fill and there's no real like anyone telling you have to do XYZ so then it's like you have to sort of be your own like regulator, like referee and like and so yeah, I to an extent like to answer, get back to your question, like yeah, I am free in the extent that like, there's no one here really who's gonna like force me to do anything, especially at this age too. But like am I really like free per se? Like probably not because I'm still sort of in that bubble of like, with my parents and like still kind of living that cushy life and so
Hmm.
yeah like I guess that is kind of a nuanced answer like yes to an extent but
I like that
I guess
word.
not
Yeah.
technically yeah
So do you feel
well
like
what
an
would you
adult
say
then?
do I feel like an adult
Yeah.
that would be a good question that honestly I can give a straight answer I would say at this point I'm transitioning slowly but I would say no like not completely
Wow.
because I feel like somewhat I've entered that phase of like you know but learning like just basic things like covering my credit card bills and like things like that. But I feel like I haven't really like there's a certain level of responsibility. Like It's funny, my older brother, he went to Pittsburgh for a while, and that was his first time being out of the house. He was doing his master's over there. And like when he was doing that, like there were times I remember we were talking and he would talk to me about like him like it was like tough. Like as much as he was excited about going there, like there were times where he was depressed and things like that. And he's not that type of guy. Like he's very sort of like cheerful. Um and he just has that type of personality where like he's just usually always happy and like kind of carefree. And like I remember him saying like, yeah, man, like I'm feeling down. And he was even talking to my mom about like, yeah, I'm feeling down and things like that. And in a way, I feel like, which I don't mean to sound dark, but I feel like those challenges are like part of like becoming an adult. Like when you're just
Yeah,
on your own and you're like, dang, like, I don't have, and it doesn't even have to be a parent. Maybe you're living with whoever, your uncle, your grandma, whatever the case is. It's like, I don't have that luxury of just like, oh, well, like, mom and dad are still here, like, they're still nagging and they're still like, calling me down for dinner and things like that. And like, now it's just you. Like you have to figure out all that stuff, not only from like a perspective of just like surviving on your own in terms of like cooking and making money and things like that, but just like learning how to navigate those obstacles of like at times you feel depressed or at times you're angry about something at work and things like that. And it's like, your mom or dad isn't necessarily there to like sort of take your mind off things. And so you have to kind of address that on your own and find ways to sort of like tackle that and navigate that. And I feel like I haven't faced that yet because of the fact that like I'm still at home and things like that. Um, and so I've transitioned somewhat. Like obviously there's certain things where it's like, oh, okay, like I'm paying my credit card bill, which is an adult thing to do or whatever. Like I feel like when you're truly an adult is like when you're kind of you've had those challenges and you're like on your own and you're finding your own way to sort of navigate that. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, that's kind of how I think of that.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
the way you put it is just very, yeah, it's like raw, but like raw with
Yeah,
like the right kind of coding, if that makes
exactly.
sense.
No,
What,
I hear you. Yeah,
yeah. What do you think
exactly.
your
Yeah.
higher self demands from you?
Hmm. Define of if you don't mind me asking, like, what do you mean by like higher self?
Like, I guess the best version of you.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Higher self. Okay, wow, that's cool. I never heard that word before. Hmm. What do I think it demands of me? There's a lot, I guess. I mean, I think part of it is so much of it is, which I kind of sometimes I kind of hate that is like so much of it is career. Um, and a lot of like what I sort of stress about or what I'm like constantly worried about is like career based, like especially being in the field that I am, which is medicine. Like, and as much as I love, like, I honestly I wouldn't switch it for anything. Like, I genuinely am excited to hopefully get to do what I want to do, but so much of my stresses in just like my daily life come back to like career stuff. And I think that's definitely one thing, one of my sort of like when you talk about like what is your higher self demand or like what do I expect of myself is like that. Like I'm constantly thinking of like, will I get into because I feel like there's so much other aspects of my life that depend on that. Like, having a family of my own, for example, is something I want to do at one point or like get married or something like that, but all of that depends on like it comes back to like, oh well, will I have a stable job, will I have the financial means to do that, and then it comes back to like, oh well, will I get into med school? And I hate that. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, I hate that everything circulates around that. Um and so like that's definitely a big thing. Um and then another thing too that I recently thought of outside of career because I remember I was like, dang, like I'm getting so caught up in like career stuff. But I think the remedy to that is like sort of thinking this bigger picture of religiously or like Islamically, keeping in mind like what is your actual purpose, for if you are happen to be a religious person or for us, like obviously Islam plays a big role in our life. And so that what happens is I feel like you get so caught up in your career, or like not even career, just worldly things, career, family, whatever the case may be, that like your real, actual purpose, religiously or spiritually, you start to forget that, and that can fade so quickly. Like you can forget it just like that. And
Yeah.
so, and that's something that like in recent, I'm like I've noticed like I've begun to demand that of myself, because like during undergraduate time I kind of like that part of me sort of started like I started to forget it a little, and it started to fade somewhat, like um and not just in the sense that like, oh, I'm praying, like, yeah, praying 5 times a day, but I feel like a lot of people can attest to like you can be praying 5 times a day and like not feel anything, and it's just like, and that's kind of like a scary feeling when you think about it. Like I'm just going, and it's just like it's an exercise. Like I remember I was watching like a talk, I'm forgetting who, maybe it was like Nomano Khan or someone, but like he was saying, like basically like it comes to the point where it's just an exercise. Like you're just going up and down, you're going through the motion, and like you don't even realize it. Like you're just
Yeah.
saying it, and it's just all muscle memory. And and yeah, and then I remember like now that college is over, I'm like, dude, like if I don't get back on that now, like things are only gonna get busier in the future, regardless of what happens with my life. And so like I feel like that's something that I've begun to demand of myself now. Just because I feel like if I have a clear, like in regards to like your sort of spiritual path, if you're clear on that, then the other stuff kind of takes a back seat. Like it doesn't stress you as much.
Yeah.
But
That's a really good point. Yeah, keep
exactly,
going.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like if you, that's what I was gonna say. Like if you get caught up in like the sort of like worldly aspects, like there's never gonna be a point. That's one thing I've learned for sure. Like there'll never be a point where it's just like those stresses will all disappear. Like, if it's not job, then it'll be your family. If it's not your family, then it'll be your extended family. If it's not that, then it's like money issues or whatever. And it's just gonna keep compounding. But when you sort of like have that spiritual focus, then those stresses are still there because that's just like a human thing. But they don't matter nearly as much because you realize like how like short those things are, and how like although they are important to an extent, like they don't matter as much as you might think they do at this point in time. And so yeah, that's one thing like I've, oh my bad, I had something on my monitor, but
You're good.
that's one thing that like I've come to sort of I want to demand that of myself, is like take that more seriously, because I feel like it'll help clear up some of my other stresses in my life.
Would you say that in that time that you were mentioning that faith was absent in your life or inside of you rather?
Inside of me, yeah. I wouldn't say it was absent, because I felt like it was still like, because it's funny, like like there is, I, as much as like I tell you like I wasn't as serious as I wanted to be, but it's so funny, like when you need something or in times of like, stress, you immediately like there's, I feel like every human has that, like you have an internal calling to be like you want to ask someone. So like for us, like, as Muslims, like my natural thing would be to make dua, whether about like the smallest things, like sometimes it would be just like an exam or something, like not even anything serious really. And so
Yeah.
I wouldn't say like it was absent, but like I think the harder part is like when, because I was reading that somewhere too, or like I heard in a talk that like it's so easy when you need something to be like, oh Allah, like help me please, like look at me, I'm in need. But once that need goes away, then you're just like, all right, like I'm good now, I don't need like I don't need anyone's help now.
Yeah.
And like not to say that like I actually said that, but it's just like then you kind of just forget about it. You're like, all right, cool, like I'm good. And
Yeah.
when in reality it's like, you're constantly in need, whether you know it or not. But so yeah, like I wouldn't say it was absent, but it was definitely like it wasn't as strong as I wanted it to be. It
What
was more just,
Yeah. Did that, so you said it wasn't absent. Would you say it was still an anchor in your life, or was something else an anchor in your life at that time?
hmm. uh I would say to an extent, yes, like for sure it was. Because honestly, had I not like I feel like if I didn't have some sort of Islamic, I don't even want to say some sort of like, I guess, spiritual guidance to some extent, I probably would have gone crazy like in undergrad, because I feel like then like you just get completely sucked in, and like there's just like no end. Like you're constantly just like worrying about either studies or whatever, and like that stress weighs on you so much, and then you don't even have like a sort of higher, like there is no higher calling, and like that can be really dangerous. And so I feel like to an extent, like part of my anchor was still like Islam and that sort of spiritual path, but part of it too is like, I guess I mean, I think a lot of it too, which is a good thing to an extent, is like my family as well, like served as a big anchor at the time, and like, and even now, of course. But like, I feel like even though I didn't necessarily like, honestly, like in our family, the way my family is, like I have all brothers, and so like we aren't super like, I don't want to say we're not super tight because we are, but we're not super like, we don't have like family like sit around and like let's talk about our problems or like things like that, or like, which is good honestly, but we just don't do that in our household as much. And like, but what I will say is like even small things like just messing around with my brothers, or like at times, like, well, a lot of times we do would eat like together, or like mainly like, especially my interactions honestly with my like younger and older brother, like those served as an anchor in a sense, because it was like I would come home and it was just kind of like, as much as I was stressed about whatever not even work wise, but like career wise or studies wise, like that would go away. And like for that, when I'm at home, like obviously I'm still at, you have homework, whatever else, but like during that time, it was like, they really helped to kind of just pull me back out of that sort of, that whole realm, and just like bring me back, but like sort of back to earth, and realize like, okay, like everything is fine. It's not as serious. You did bad on an exam, like you'll live, you'll move on.
Did you ever have
Uh,
those experiences that ripped you up in that undergraduate time? And you were
I
like,
think,
damn.
yeah, like there was, I remember a time, there was funny early, like early in my undergraduate career. Um, and again, this like all comes back to like, with this like specific, like, being a pre-medical student, like you get so obsessed with like GPA, like grades. And that's kind of how my high school was too. Like even in high school, I was super like, I was kind of more of like a nerdy kid. Like the groups that I had that I hung out with, like we were all super like, big on like school stuff and whatnot. And I remember like early on, like I had done bad on like, I think it was a general chemistry exam, like general chemistry two. Uh, and I had basically, I ended the class with like, I forgot, like it was either low B or something like that. And I was really like, that was one of those experiences where I was just like, damn, like I was like, are you serious, bro? Like you really, like, as people say, like, oh, I clutched that exam. Like I did not clutch that exam. Like I did good on all the other ones. In the final, I remember I like bombed it, and I was like, bro, like, and I was really pissed because I was like, this is gonna weigh on my GPA and like this and that. And I remember coming home. That was my last exam of that semester. That was like the spring of my freshman year, I want to say. And like I was so distraught about it. Like it was literally like weighing on me. Like I'm just like sitting there. I took a nap. I woke up. I'm like literally like sitting there. Like you would think I like lost a family member or something, like the way I was like looking, like sitting around. And then like I remember I was just like, I talked to my mom, like, and to like the rest of my family, and then like I put it into perspective, and I'm like, dude. And that's kind of where I think I had like a turning point, where I was just like, I'm like, I cannot let any sort of school stuff or anything career wise ever have that sort of hold on me, to where like I do bad on something, and I like my whole like week is just ruined. Like, and that's when I was just like, yeah, like, as much as I do like want to do what I want to do, and I do want to go into this career and whatever else, like it's not nearly as important as I was making it seem. And
Yeah.
like, and that was a, honestly, that literally, that moment, like as small as it was like a huge transition for me throughout the rest of my college career.
You
Um,
know, this is
yeah, go
very
ahead.
interesting because I wanted to mention that you're a really nice guy. Like you have that
Mm.
feel good charisma about you. Every time I meet you, it's like, damn, like that guy, he's proper, you know? And
Yeah.
I really like how you keep mentioning like you have this interest to go into this and to do what you want to do. In my
Mm.
experiences, of course, I'm not strapping a label on everyone, but I find that some of the meanest people I've met are in medicine and in religion. But you have this very like, this kind sort of aura. Could you say that you can relate to that? Some of the meanest people you've met are in medicine and religion?
Dude, 1000%.
Yeah. And
It's
those are
so
the
funny
people
you
that are
mentioned
supposed
that.
to be the kindest, right?
Yeah, that's such like a yeah, man. That's so funny you mentioned that. Like, that's such like I feel that so strongly. Like, literally, I even my own parents talk to me about that sometimes. Like, some of the strictest, most like the people who will pass judgment on you are like either in medicine or happen to be in religious like sort of realm. And I don't know what it is. Like, I think in regards to religion and in medicine, I think like what happens is you get to a level and like it takes so much work, especially like in medicine, because I'm not too familiar with the religious side of things, but in medicine, like you work so hard, you're grinding like your whole life, like your young adult life, to get to a certain point that you feel like, you know what, like I've earned that. Like I've earned the right to be like I'm at this level, like you can't take that away from me. Like I did all of this. And so like because of that, you get this superiority complex of like you see someone else who's like whatever working as whatever like a electrical engineer or like this or maybe they're just like not working an odd job like working in a gas station or something and you're just like oh like bro like that guy or this guy or you're comparing him to me like and it is and in religion too like I feel like you see like certain alims or scholars and like they're hafiz of the Quran and even I remember like kids my age back when I was in Sunday school like all the kids who were like Hafiz as like young ages were always the meanest kids. Like I don't know if that it was just my experience, but they were always like super rude and like they had like this little clique of like all little fathers. I'm like, bro, like I'm just like
Yeah.
and I blame a lot of it honestly on like the parent in my opinion, a lot of it goes back to parenting like and maybe people disagree but like when you put your child through that and you just are on them about like you have to do this like and it becomes something bigger than like what it is it becomes like a like you're becoming hafiz not only for not for the sake of Allah but like for our family for like for when we go to other families or same thing with like doctor stuff it's like you're
Yeah.
not just becoming a physician to earn money it's so that like it's to like uphold our family to show people that like yeah this is our kid like he did that and like when you put that pressure on a child and like sometimes it unfortunately like it breaks the child or in the case that they are able to live up to that expectation then they have such like a superiority about them because they're like their parents have been like fueling it. They're like, if you do this, like like are they're already bragging about their kid to other parents, like putting down other kids, like, oh, do you see his kid? He works at like this, like you're a doctor, and like so then it sort of builds up the kid that like, yeah, like I am a doctor or I am a father, or whatever the case is. And like eventually it gets to like they're older and they still have that complex of like, yeah, like I am
Yeah.
this, like I deserve that respect. Um, and that's so true, dude. Like, yeah, I see that
Yeah.
all the time, and I'm like, damn.
It's an interesting phenomenon. I still haven't made sense of it myself, but I do notice that. And again, I'm not, and I'm sure you're not either, like strapping a label on anyone, but it's just
Right,
an
right, exactly.
observation. It's just an observation. But going
It
back to this
is,
whole
dude.
kindness thing about you, is there like in film or television or any piece of art, is there a character that you like strongly resonate with? Very curious about that.
Like a specific character, or are you saying like just a general sort of like the hero or the villain type of?
Yeah, like a specific character, like, yeah, like Wolverine, that's my guy, or
Oh,
I don't
like
know,
that type
something
of.
like that. Yeah.
Hmm. Honestly, not really, and only because I feel like I haven't watched enough to like to relate myself because I'm trying to think like I feel like I would definitely say no to like most superheroes because I don't feel like I have that sort of vibe of like you watch like all those superhero movies and they
Yeah.
have that sort of aura of like that's the guy, and I'm like I don't think I'm on that level, but even in other shows, like I'm trying to think, there's not a specific person that comes to mind. Do you have someone like that for yourself, or like, or even for me that comes to your mind?
Well, for you, I don't know. I was just curious, because
Hmm.
I honestly like that, the charisma that you have. It's to me, it's very
Right.
unique the way you have it. And so I was just curious if there's anyone that you looked into and you're like, like I see myself in that person.
And that
Um,
for yeah, right, right.
yeah, that was just something
Uh,
that I was curious about.
no, that's a fair question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, good. No, I was gonna say that's a fair question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm trying to think. I feel like there is maybe, but I just can't think of it. But go ahead. You were saying for yourself, who was it?
For myself, yeah, I'm really not. It's a good question as well. There's so many out there, but I guess I sometimes see myself in. Um, I see myself in mythologies. Yeah. There's a lot of
Oh,
different
okay,
mythological
okay.
stories, and I can see like lessons or like archetypes, and it's like, oh, I kind of see myself in that. But
Right, right.
I'm curious, do you have any closing thoughts? We're coming to an end.
Oh,
Anything
right,
you
right. We
felt
have.
like you wanted to say, or you didn't get a chance to? Anything on your mind that you wanted to express?
Mm, no, I think honestly, for the most part, like it's funny when you bring up like characters and things like that. Like, dude, speaking about you, and not to toot your own horn or like just hype you up, but like honestly, dude, when I saw like the certain things about you, like I've never seen, like you remind me of someone from like a show, like you would be a show type of person, like, and I mean that in the sense that like you have certain things, like I remember specifically when you have that tendency to like write in your notebook a lot, like even when we were talking that first time, like we met a while back, or like maybe it was the second time, like I had said something and like you were just like, oh yeah, and then you pulled out your note and I was like, whoa, what is he doing? And then like I was like, oh wow, like I noticed you do that like a lot, like not just like with me,
Yeah,
like with other people say something and you like write, and I was like, that's so cool, and like I feel like that's so rare, like to see nowadays, like a lot of times in a conversation, like most people are just generically like, yeah, yeah, man, like, oh yeah, whatever. But like, and they'll just
yeah,
like say yeah and not even know like what the other person is necessarily saying. But I saw you do that and I was like, oh, that's like it was such a cool thing to me. Like that was something that always stuck, like even later on when we were talking, like I don't know, something about that always stuck. I'm like, that's such a smart idea. Because there are times where like I'll talk to other people and they say something, I'm like, man, I wish I wrote that down, or like or it's just like something sticks and you're just like, oh, I want
yeah.
to write that down.
You know
And
what
I thought that was
happens?
so cool.
I appreciate that. It's kind of you to
Yeah.
mention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah,
it's
dude.
always a great conversation with you, dude. Like, yeah, like going back to the first time I met you, like we just kind of stood there like for like a good portion of the night just talking, and it was
Yeah.
an awesome time. It was really cool.
Exactly.
And it hasn't even
Dude,
been a year
no.
that I've known you, but it's like the connection was just so deep, so it's cool.
Exactly. No, dude, 100% I feel you on that, man. Like you're very like unique and cool guy, bro. Like I've never met someone like you, like that just like has those sort of tendencies and things like that. Like that's a rare quality. And I feel like that's like a really good thing to have because inshallah, like I just feel like people like that, like it's like something special. Like it'll take you far one day, just having those sorts of small things. Like even though maybe to you it's like that's not anything big, like I just write down what people say, but like I just think like having that sort of like care about what other people are saying is like really important. So yeah, no man, likewise, it's always a great conversation with you, brother.
Yeah, for sure. But thank you so
Yeah,
much,
dude.
Zane, for being on this podcast, man. It was an awesome conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to
Absolutely.
be here.
Absolutely, man. No, trust me, the pleasure was all mine. I'd be glad to come back another day.
For
Hopefully, if I
sure.
have the honor to, I'd be glad to come back.
100%. 100%. But until then, my friend, you take care, yeah?
Yes, sir. You as well, man. You as well.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.